Welcome, golf fans, pursuers of knowledge in the almighty dollar. This is your golf guru bringing you the 2023 the Memorial Tournament. This is my preview show with a focus on the betting, but I go through all the custom stat models, all the information you need to know to get those DFS lineups going, and also maybe get in some bets if you're interested. First and foremost, thank you for stopping by, and happy belated Memorial Day weekend to all. And let's go talk a little golf. Okay, but first, I do have a giveaway. I won a little money last week, and I forgot to do it for the PGA Championship. But usually for every major, I do a giveaway to thank you guys that are part of the community, always sending notes and even nuggets that maybe I miss. So this is a little me giving back to the community. And what am I giving away? I am going to be randomly selecting 5 winners to win $100 each. Cold hard cash. And all you need to do to get in this giveaway is, if you are not a subscriber, please click that subscribe button. We're also trying to get to 2,000 subscribers. We are very, very close. And last but not least, click that like button and share it. And then I just need to know in the YouTube comments below, who do you think is going to win the 123rd US Open held at the LA Country Club coming up in a couple weeks. So again, summarize. I need you to be a subscriber if you're not, because I need you to tell me in the YouTube comments below, who do you think is going to win the US Open coming up in a couple weeks? And I will throw all those entries into a random generator, and it will pick 5 winners, which I will then notify via YouTube and get your email, PayPal or Venmo or whatever, and get the money over to you guys. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit real quick about the Charles Schwab. I told you guys going into this, I felt pretty good. I've had a lot of success at this tournament, and it was a great weekend again on a lot of different fronts. Of course, as you all know, if you've been following me for a while, I have been always on Emiliano Grillo, touting him even in times where, it was kind of hard to. He had some struggle, especially last year, but I kind of stated, hey, look at what he's been doing, and a lot of it was on the putting side. Gaining strokes with a putter 7 out of 9 times, which for Emilio is very not usual. As we know, typically that's where he struggles. So when you put his ball striking together with gaining with the putter and confidence, it all worked out. Now, of course, there were some things that made us a little nervous. We'll talk about that in a second. But of course, he wins that amazing trophy, that very nice, I don't know, reminds me of the RBC Heritage, like a tartan jacket. But more is that 1973 custom Bronco behind him, which is kind of my dream retirement vehicle, if you want to say. That thing is sweet, and out of all the ones they had, the Smokey and the Bandit Trans Am last year, that Burnsy got. Before that, I think Kokrak won the Super Wagon, and then before that was like a Challenger with Kevin out. Yeah, funny enough, I remember all the vehicles that these guys give away, because I think out of all the tournaments, from what you win, of course, there's the money and the trophy, there, and the jackets. Of course, the Masters is amazing with the green, but really nothing beats that car. So that's what I think is pretty cool. And as I kind of tweeted out, of course, I bet Emiliano pre-tournament. I put that on my betting card. I didn't like oversell it because, hey, it was, I actually, before I did any analysis, I told you guys on Monday mornings, I already know the tournament coming. I already know some of the players that I'm focusing on, and he was one of them. I think the guy that I touted the most that I thought could do it was Seabass, Christian Bezadenhout, who had a decent tournament, but of course did not win. But was not on Adam Schenk, which, typically I am on Schenk Eponymous. But so I would have been a little bummed that I did live bet him on Sunday morning when I saw that he was like 12, 15 to 1. I could get him, and thought, out of the group that was there, if Emiliano or Harris English did not pull it off, I thought Schenk would be the guy, and came very close. Had a couple opportunities. All right, so everybody knows, if you got to watch the tournament, if you didn't, on 18, Grillo goes into the final hole with a 2-stroke lead. I was feeling pretty comfortable, and then he hit like a high fade that looked like the wind just kept taking it, ended up in this aqueduct or a little creek here, whatever you want to call it, and the ball, of course, started to roll forever back towards the tee, and he could have hit it out of there, but he took too much time, I guess, to make that decision, which it might have been a little bit tricky. It's probably better he took the drop. But then, of course, he ends up double bogeying. The greens were super hard, which we could talk a little bit about. Of course, everybody knows they were going to be, Gil Hanse had a renovation that was going to be taking place right after this tournament to get it ready for next year. So there's going to be some changes. I don't think significant. I think they're going to try to keep the flow of the course the same, just taking away some bunkers, adding some things, maybe making the greens different, elevating. probably putting in controlled sub air. But anyway, so they let those greens go, as you can see Saturday, Sunday, just a crazy firmness fire. They were touting out there that the greens were like literally turning purple because they were not worried about losing them. So anyways, all that said, he double bogeys, and then they go into the playoff. Shank ends up having a chance on the 18th to actually not to have a playoff, and just, I think, left it an inch or two from going in the hole. Had my heart stopping. And then, of course, the one thing that I remember the most was Emiliano Grillo got some crazy bounces like on every shot in the playoff, from his drive on 18 to the iron coming in. And then, of course, on that par 3, almost goes in the sand, but actually kicks it within, 4 or 5 feet of the hole to make his birdie. And Shank still had an amazing shot to, make him have to make that, because he had a pretty easy par putt from behind the green. So that was all awesome. And then, of course, you had Harry Hall kind of out of nowhere. And we'll look a little bit at the stats about that, because I want to talk more about Harry Hall going forward. But the one thing I wanted to note out, I didn't know a ton about Emiliano Grillo. Of course, I mentioned, he did amazing on the Corn Ferry at the time. The name, I don't remember. It was the Web or the Nike, whatever the heck it was at the time. But he won their tour championship, first event as a PGA member, wins the Safeway, which is now called the Fort Ned. And there was the craziest high expectations for Grillo. And then it just never really came to fruition. I watched over and over times where it looked like he could win a tournament, and the putter typically on Sunday would bite him. But what I didn't know is, the guy just overall seems like an amazing guy. And of course, if you were watching the coverage and probably seen this on Twitter, that, there was a couple, young kids kind of watching him as he's, prepping for the playoff, knowing that that's probably going to happen, hopefully happen at that time, right? Because Shank did have an opportunity to birdie on 18 to win. And, instead of super focused and really, trying to stay in the moment, he invites these 2 young kids, probably age, I don't know, around 10 or so, to come out, hit some balls, kind of just kept them a loose mind. And it was just amazing karma. Of course, after he, brought him in the locker room and signed some hats and gave him gloves, and I don't know, it was just an amazing gesture. And nothing against Tiger, but whenever I thought about Tiger, there's no way in a million years Tiger going into a playoff is he going to do some kind of gesture like that. I mean, Tiger during his days was pretty much a robot on the course. And I understand why he did what he did, but it is, for me, and I'm sure a lot of the golf fans, nice to see somebody with, personality and doing something like that for the game. And again, he mentioned, of course, that Grillo just had I believe it was a daughter about 14 months ago, which kind of has given him a whole new perspective on life. And, he even stated that when he made that double bogey on 18, it really didn't faze him. Now, I'm sure if Shank would have made that birdie putt, it would have fazed him. He lost the tournament because of that. But all in all, it was a great tournament. Anytime we get a playoff, typically it's going to be an amazing tournament. And like I said, I enjoyed it. And of course, it doesn't hurt that it helped out on the DFS side and also on the betting side. I mean, literally, that's probably the first bet I've hit, which I call a long shot. And now with these elevated events, long shots are pretty much the way I look at it, is anything 30 to 40 to 1. I got them at 80. I saw some hundreds out there. So awesome, if you got them at that. But, I didn't hit the Kitayama one at the Arnold Palmer. And I really, off the top of my head, can't think of any of the other ones that were really too great of odds this year. I mean, either you were betting Scheffler or Rahm at somewhere under 10 to 1. And that's the way it's been. Feels like at least almost every tournament this year. All right, let's look real quickly at some stroke gain data. I did want to talk about Harry Hall. So again, he came out and was first round leader. I believe shot 8 under. Just crazy. I think the nearest guy was six or 4 or 5. It was just an amazing round he put in round 1, and I was nowhere on that. Funny enough, I did bet a bunch of the early guys first round leader, but Harry Hall did not look like one of the guys that I was interested in. But really, you can see it was not done with the irons, not really off the tee, but man, he gained a ton of strokes. And if you watch that first round, I think he was on 16 or 17. He had over a 50-some footer to save par and literally putting off the fringe and drain that thing. And so that was the kind of day he was having. Of course, then I think if I remember right, the second day he came out and shot 4 under. And then Saturday he had those 2 double bogeys. And it looked like it was going to go really south, but he did a good job to kind of hold it together and had a shot also to be in that playoff. And he, on 18, hit a great drive. Just the wind kind of took it a little left, got a pretty big bounce, ended up in the water. And that kind of took away his hopes to get in the playoff. But still, what a great finish. And then Scotty doing what Scotty Scheffler does. Still has not had a worse than a 12th place finish since I believe October in the CJ Cup. I mean, it's just unreal what this guy does every week, end after end. So that's kind of the things I want to note. And of course, also what I noticed, Michael Kim, I told you guys, I was on him. I believe that was for the Byron Nelson. He misses the cut. And then we go out to the PGA Championship, I believe. Makes the cut, wasn't on him, and then, so I was kind of over it. And then he goes out and, again, has a sixth place finish. So Michael Kim's still looking like he is in pretty good form. And then there's Paul Haley, who's, someone that, my understanding, I don't know a lot about him, but he's been on the tour for a long time. Just had a really good around the green and putting expose. And I believe shot 67, 68 over the weekend, which on what was going on those courses, and if you were playing Showdown and all that, you're probably watching it pretty closely. To have a guy just shoot under in your team of six, you were happy because a lot of guys were just blowing up with 4, 5, 6 over rounds. So you also had Max Homa, who had a pretty solid, still struggling a little bit off the tee. The putter worked well. The irons look a little better. Mark Hubbard, kind of Jekyll and Hyde us, where he had a pretty good solid round. I do believe I did pick him because he did make some of my DFS very large GPP lineups. And Ricky Fowler, I wasn't on him for the PGA, and I think I stayed off him for this event, but Ricky had a good outing and a little bit not so good off the tee, but everything else great around the green. And the putter, at least he was positive, where that is what killed him in the PGA Championship. Okay, let's switch gears. And the reason why you're here is we want to talk about the Memorial Tournament. And now we are heading north up to the Midwest, not too far from my location, to Dublin, Ohio. Yes, I said Dublin, Ohio, and I'm sure you're pretty familiar. Of course, this is Jack's place. Of course, that he built, I believe, got the land and opened this thing in 74, but had the land for quite a while and built this course, a bit after, well, at least named it after the Muirfield course in Scotland, where he won 3 of his British Opens, the title at the time, now the Open. And I've always kind of felt like it's reminded me a ton of what we see at Augusta. And I think, it's kind of a mix of love there. This will be the 47th year that they've hosted this tournament here. And they had a pretty decent renovation in 2020. But Jack, as this is his baby, where he spends quite a bit of his time, he does a ton of course design, as we know. But he also likes to tinker with this course all the time and making changes left and right. But the biggest renovation he's done was back in 2020. It is a par 72, playing 7,571 yards. That's about an extra 40, 50 yards than it was last year. I'll talk about that on the scorecard. They did add a distance on a couple holes. We're pretty much bent grass across the board, fairways, and then rough is playing somewhere between 3.5, 4 inches. But this rough is not, if it was 4-inch Bermuda, it'd be a whole different conversation. Now, I'm not saying that it's easy, but it is easier than getting out of a 4-inch Bermuda rough. And then the greens are this premier, bent grass. Again, a lot like Augusta, some of the best greens around that the PGA Tour gets to play. We are an invite only, so your player field, just like we just saw at the Colonial for the Charles Schwab, is at 120 players, cut down to T65 in ties. And last year, funny enough, I was looking at this, it was 70 players got through the cut, just side note. So you're better than 50% on your DFS, getting 6 of 6 through. So a little easier than we have the full player field. Historical cut line, I would say, is more probably towards this +2, +3. But over the last 4 or 5 years, it's been from 1 under to +3. And it's all depending on what happens in the weather. Of course, last year, Billy Horschel shot 13 under and was kind of out of nowhere. I mean, I went back and looked at Billy. Now, he had a really nice Florida swing and then kind of dipped a little bit because I was really curious where Billy's game is. We'll try to look at when I go through my picks show, which I'm going to try to get together this afternoon for you and get it out Tuesday evening is possible. Probably going to end up being Wednesday. Billy's been in terrible form this year, which you've probably seen. I've talked about it a bit on the show where he tried to make some swing changes, and we saw it at like the Tournament of Champions where he came out and just stunk it up. And that is at Kapalua, which is one of the easiest courses these guys play. And he ended up, I think, 30th in that tournament out of, 40 guys, 40 plus, maybe it's 43 total. That's his best finish he's had all year. With that said, I mean, it's going to be pretty hard to go back to Billy Ho, but I just wanted to kind of call that out. Of course, you had the 2021, Morikawa Cantlay playoff, and that was due to Rahm having to pull out of the tournament because he tested positive for COVID after his Saturday finish, which he was leading that tournament 6 under. And that, personally, not the biggest fan of Rahm. He's an amazing player, but just me personally, but I felt for that guy hugely when that happened. I just thought that the PGA could have handled that so much better. And what I mean is that they could have shot him off first tee by himself and let him finish. But, then you could be like, well, he's not in, the final grouping, and he might have had an advantage under that. But I mean, I don't know. Just let the guy play by himself if you're that worried about it. I think he tested positive a couple times with no symptoms. I don't know. It was crap. But long story short, I actually, funny enough, had money on Morikawa, but he lost in the playoff to Cantlay. And those guys, like I said, had no thought process that they had any shot to win that tournament as the round finished Saturday. But then, of course, had to change mindsets for being the last group on Sunday. Of course, Rahm would have went back-to-back as he won in 2020. And that was, if I remember correctly, so that was during the COVID time, right? They played the workday previously where, the guys torched the course and then they set the greens, firmed the greens up. The rough was up a bit, where the pin placements were, like the course played night and day. And then, of course, weather came in and Rahm won at 9 under, and it looked like Fitzy was in the battle. I don't remember Fitzy that much, but I have it on there. And then, of course, last year, what, the note is, and we'll kind of go through this when we look at the stroke gain data from past winners, is that, we had a bit of rain at the tournament, and so Jack's course played quite a bit softer, which allowed these guys to fire at pins that they typically will not. And that is not going to be the case for this tournament. It has been very dry lately in the Midwest, and there is no rain in the forecast for quite a while. So I'm expecting that Murfield Village will play very fast and firm, which is going to keep the scores probably under 10 under, not too far off what we just saw at the Charles Schwab at the Colonial. Smaller than average green, so a lot like what we just saw, 5,000 square feet. That is exactly the total size of what the Colonial hosts for the Charles Schwab, and that's what we got here. But what's a little unique about this place is, yes, there is slope. What I've kind of noticed is you've got flatter greens. I talked about this for the Charles Schwab, that there's these very subtle breaks, but these greens tend to be easier to putt inside of 10 feet because typically there is slope and you can see the break if you have it. But over and over, a lot of guys that are not the greatest putters have won or came runner up here, and we'll go through that a little bit. Number of sand bunkers is 68, and they are pretty tough sand bunkers to get out of, pretty deep. Also have a little bit of that, pot bunker feelish on some of them. You've got a lot of water out here, even though I don't feel like the water causes a ton of issues. Now, there's some holes that it can definitely, but overall, there is a lot of water. You got 13 holes. That water does come in possible into play. And as I mentioned, these greens should be lightning fast, and there is a bit of slope running somewhere probably by the weekend. I would guess 13 to 13 and a half. Again, a lot like what we see at Augusta, if the weather permits. The course defense, I mentioned, you got high rough, but there are pretty generous fairways, but they do tighten. So it's like, how I see it was Jack's kind of thought process was he built the course, of course, for the members to allow them to have area to drive the ball. But he also was smart enough to tighten those fairways up where typically PGA pros are landing it. So if you're flying at 300 plus, you'll see that the fairways tighten quite a bit. And there's some issues once you get into there, of course, sand traps and rough. So it was pretty smart on his design on how he did it. But if you're a guy that hits it 275, 280, very accurate, you can also do well at this course if you're good with that 200 plus out. So the weather looks actually very great. It's just going to it's going to allow for a very firm and fast. The wind does not look like it's going to be a factor, at least again what Windfinder is saying right now. There is a bit of tree line, but as I mentioned, pretty generous as the fairways start to begin and kind of next in. You got some very tough par threes. And then I got here the final 5 holes is a true test, but really the last 3 holes, it's kind of funny. I think, at Wells Fargo, they got the green mile, but because everything just seems green here, it seems like the last 3 holes here should have a name, and they don't that I ever heard of. But like the Snake Pit, like the Bear Trap, or, all those, the last 3 holes here are some of the toughest 3-hole finishes around. I had some notes here, as I kind of already mentioned. The rain softened up the course in 2021, and also we saw a bit of that last year. It is a big boy course. You do need all facets of the game. Typically, again, ball striking and solid putting. I don't know about the solid. I mean, you need decent putters. When you look at the winners that we've seen, at least sort of the last 4 or 5 years, they're all very good putters on bent grass and have good short games. And I think all this, yeah, again, it was just stating that that workday in 2020, the way they set it up, that course was night and day. And Jack kind of laughed and I think stated that, you'll see what this course looks like literally just 4 or 5 days later. It was night and day. Okay, so to give you a visualization of what this course and how it kind of runs in the water, I've kind of mentioned multiple times. I mean, if you look at number one, a lot of area here to drive the ball, but of course, as you get up where the pros typically land it, it gets a lot tighter. You see the sand traps. You got these creeks and ponds that run along and can cause issues, especially like here on number five, number six, it could possibly. But over and over, like I said, if you kind of look at the way he narrows these fairways where the landing spots typically happen, again, like on 17, ton of room to drive it, but again, up here in the neck, if you're going to try to hit it 330, 340, you're going to be maybe some issues. And then the big thing to focus, as I mentioned, is these last kind of finishing holes. Number 14 is that drivable par four. At least you can get it up in there. But, you got decisions to make because you got water on the right, you got sand on the left, and, would you rather just lay it up in front of the creek and then have your, 100-yard shot in? It's going to be kind of interesting to see what the guys end up doing. But a lot can happen on these last few finishing holes. The lead can definitely change. And that's really all I'll call out. Again, you can see this thing's cut in the middle of a bunch of trees. And again, there's definitely trees that come into play. And then 18th being a very tough hole, finishing hole coming in. Again, like the last three holes, a par three and I believe two par fours, if I remember correctly. We'll look at the scorecard, but I mean total over 1,000 yards just in those three holes. And as I mentioned, the two par fours, so you got almost 500, almost 1,200 yards. But you can see 2, 4, and 1. Shocking again. There's not a name for this, but it is definitely a test of golf that could change the outcome. And then right before that, you've got two scoring options. I mentioned that almost drivable. Guys can go for that par 14, or I'm sorry, par 4, number 14, and then you got one of the easier par 5s. And that's what shows up at this course quite a bit. Like I always call this like the mini major courses. Well, you got the Riv where they play the Genesis, I should say. You've got the Arnold Palmer at Bay Hill, and I always thought the Wells Fargo at Quail. Those were kind of like you get some of the better fields and was probably the better test of golfs outside of the majors. And with that said, giving you again opportunities on the par 5s. And typically where I was going is you got to score on the par 5s, and a lot like Augusta, also just kind of stay par if possible on the par 4s and par 3s. From an advantage of a showdown perspective, I don't really see anything. I mean, the front 9 is easier than the back, as you can kind of see with just the red. Where that consecutive birdie bonus would take place was somewhere probably between hole 5 and hole 9, but I don't see any advantage of going off the back and going around, right? Because you're running into those. So, you can kind of pick your poison as you choose, guys off the 10 or the first at the Charles Schwab, which did come into a little bit, into fruition was, I said, hey, I'm taking a lot of guys that go off the back because there was that connection where you could, definitely get a birdie in, and then you came into some easy holes. So, but not here. And then real quick, if you want to look at the official scorecard, you look at the yardage is confirmed. And then this par 3, I believe it was about 30 yards. They've added on to that. Now, again, it's where they put the tees, but there's a possibility to go up to 220. And then, of course, also this par 4, they actually stretched it out on number 17 to even make it tougher. And you can see added about, somewhere around 20 yards of length. So that's the only notes that I'll call off between past historical data we have over the last couple of years after the renovation. All right. With all that said, of course, I always go through, and every year, I kind of keep tweaking what my stroke gain model is going to be. And this is the larger model. And what I've kind of call it now is the player profile that I'm looking for. It's still number one. And, whenever you get to these bigger boy courses, you need the best ball strikers possible. But approach does show up king over, distance off the tee. Next would be around the green and putting. Some people will, can push back on the putting side, but overall, when you look at who wins these tournaments, and I'll show that, you do need still guys that can really putt, hinge like a Patrick Cantlay, is just an amazing putter on bent greens over and over and over. He shows up at the BMW every year where it's bent greens and wins. And he's also shown up here over and over doing either winning or having a chance to win. Instead of off the tee, I did change it to good drives. I'm just, again, looking for guys that can, repetitively hit their drive and then hit the green on approach. Not so much concerned about, guys that are hitting it 350 and hitting fairways or just hitting it 350 because, again, the rough is a bit penal. The true proximity of the pins, again, if you don't understand what that is, it's your approach shot. How tight can you get it to the pin from a certain distance? And with that said, what shows up the most is at 175 to 200 at 22%, and then 150 to 175, 23%. And those approach shots also really pull out the best ball strikers, kind of key. And if you're really good at those distances with your irons, typically you're one of the better ball strikers. I mentioned those long par threes. We got 3 of those, so I'm taking a look at that. You've got 7 of these par fours you need to manage, 450 to 500. And then, again, I'm just looking at stroke gain. Who's leading gaining strokes on par fives? I wasn't so concerned about the distance because they kind of fluctuated. And they're all, I don't say gettable, but they are definitely your birdie opportunities on this course. And just off the top of my head, I think last I knew, Patrick Cantlay was actually leading the PGA Tour in stroke gain on par fives. All right, with that said, of course, there's Patrick Cantlay when he won back in, 2020? I think, well, the playoff, which was 2021. Take that back. Getting the trophy there from Jack. And yeah, there you go. So when he outdueled Morikawa. And again, you can see, not that there's any red off the tee, but you didn't have to be, just amazing. But the irons really show up gaining average at least around 5 strokes on the field. Around the green shows up, and then the putter again shows up that you do need to gain to be in this kind of top 5 bracket, and kind of highlighted that there. And then the year John Rahm won, which was kind of interesting, and we'll look at this a little further. The Ryan Palmers of the world, which amazing ball strikers, but not typically the best putters, do show up here. Hence, you could see that, didn't gain a whole much with the putter, but he did enough, but just went nuts with the irons. That can happen here because, again, what has been shown is because of how pure these greens are and how they roll, that guys do typically make a ton of putts 10 feet and in, which was not the case at the Charles Schwab Colonial course, which I kind of also called out. It did show up. And again, the reason why, if you're curious, was when you have very flat, fast greens, typically there's going to be subtle breaks that you just can't read, or if you have a little more slope, it kind of gives away which way the green should be breaking. Then we can look again at the year Patrick Cantlay won the first time here at Memorial and beat Adam Scott. Again, kind of great ball striker, at least at the time, but not the best putter. But the putter has come along a little better. I'd throw Streelman in that camp, not the greatest putter. Mark Leishman I would put as a good putter than Hideki, who actually won here back in 2014, his first win on the PGA Tour. Also not known for the best putter, but has shown up here and there at bent grass, hence when he won the Masters. But you can see over and over, ton of strokes needed to be gained on approach. Around the green shows up, and then again, the putter, maybe not as demanding, but again, the irons over and over is called out. And then you could really see here, not the need to really gain a ton off the tee. Just, even if, again, when you understand gaining off the tee, it is distance with fairways combined. And a guy like Brennan Todd, who only hits at 275, 280 on average, when he hits the driver, even though he's hitting fairways, because he's not gaining with the distance, the calculation doesn't work out that you're really gaining a lot on the field. And then I pulled up last year's, of course, to take a look at. And, funny enough, I don't remember a ton of this tournament. And I'm guessing it's because I was probably mad that I did not bet on Billy Horschel. And I don't know how much, maybe I was, I don't know. But I don't remember a ton on Sunday. And again, maybe because Billy Horschel had such a lead and I didn't have money on him. But again, it kind of shows up irons are king. Aaron Wise fits right into that bucket. Joaquin Niemann, one of the great, best ball strikers, those two, but, typically not that great with a putter. But what was kind of interesting also is that the around the green was the first time where you saw guys up there, but you got to remember that the weather was very soft conditions comparative to what this course can play, which allowed the irons, you could go at the flags, stick the ball, check it, where, you didn't have to hit much around the green. And if you had just a couple bad, around the green shots because of, maybe you didn't have that many, well, that's going to fluctuate. So again, stats can be skewed multiple different ways. Then I pulled this up because I just thought it was kind of interesting, a different view of looking at past champions, and it's more about looking at the runner-up. But we can call out, I consider Billy Horschel a good putter. Typically shows up really well on Bermuda. Has always been kind of a strength. Cantlay is a really good putter, especially on bent. John Rahm is a good putter. Cantlay, I think DeChambeau is a good putter. I mean, he's always gotten kind of forgot about. Now, Jason Duffner, again, just a ball striking ninja. And funny enough, we were just at Oak Hill where he won the PGA Championship, and again, just ball strike the world out of it. Wasn't, I don't even know if he even gained with the putter, maybe a stroke when I look back. McGirt, I don't really know. I'm not even going to state, but I know David Lemer's game, really good putter when he won, and still is a very good putter. The Swede, Hideki, again, this actually, funny enough, was the first time he ever played the Memorial and won it, and was his first PGA victory. And then if you kind of look at these guys over here, Wise, Morikawa at the time was a better putter. I think, he's fallen, like I said, under the camp to me as great ball striker, can't trust a putter. Ryan Palmer, I think he fits in the Griot, Glover kind of camp. Adam Scott at the time was not that good of a putter, but great ball striker. Benoit Anne. So you can go through this list over and over and look at a lot of guys who typically are not known for the putting, but really good ball strikers. So hence, I think the greens, from visually and how pure they are a little simpler to make putts. Okay, with all that said, of course, I created a custom stat model, as I always do for you guys. And what I'm showing here is the top 15 players that fit within my custom stat model. And if you're curious, the weighting on all these stroking categories, approach, I got 25%. Of course, again, the key stroke, which is always very typical. Approach is king. But around the green, I got up there sometimes, like at the Colonial, I didn't even put around the green in. Putting, I still want guys that can putt. Like I said, when you ultimately look at who wins this thing, I do want to identify guys that putt. So I got that at 10%. Ball striking at 15, good drives at 10. And then those two proximity of the pins I talked about earlier at 5% each. Gaining strokes on the par fives, I think is crucial here. So I got that at 10%. And then just manage those par fours and par threes with pars, and you should do very well. And with all that said, if you're curious, again, what you're looking at here, actually, funny enough, this was MGM odds for whatever reason at the time. Fantasy National did not pull in Draftkings, which typically that's what I use, but they're all probably pretty similar. With that said, you got Scotty Scheffler over the last 24 rounds, no filters turned on, coming up number one against that model. You got John Rahn, you got Xander Schauffele, who's had a really nice history at this event. I don't know if he's ever really been in contention to win off the top of my head, but he's always been up there, never really missing cuts and always, top 10, top 20 kind of thing. You got Terrell Hatton, Wyndham Clark, of course, coming off his recent win at the Wells Fargo, but of course missed the cut at the PGA Championship. You got Patrick Cantlay, my buddy Griot shows up, who I think is still a good fit for this, especially that he's been gaining with the putter, but of course coming off, a win, which is not his first win, but he hasn't won in like 8 years. So kind of curious on that one. I didn't, really do a whole lot with him yet, but I'll still play him in DFS. You got Victor Hovland, who's still been playing good golf, but just, kind of having a struggle round here or there. It seems like the irons, can be a little on and off. The putter could be a little on and off, but I think he shot like, 4 under. I don't know, that was round 2 at Charles Schwab, which was a great round of golf on that course. So still good form, good fit for this course. You got Hideki, I already mentioned, past winner. Feels like he's kind of gotten over the hump of dealing with that neck injury. Been having some good showings lately. Morikawa is still, for me, struggling. Not a bad Colonial, kind of made a comeback, made the cut, and had a decent weekend. But again, the putter still makes me a little nervous. Corey Connors, I think, is a great fit. Fits right in the Griot bucket for me. Ricky Fowler, Jordan Spieth. Of course, Jordan was pretty shocking. I didn't really talk about the guys that missed the cut that shocked. I just kind of want to get through it. But the short of it is, we still don't know what that wrist is doing. He talked about it, said he was feeling a lot better. And but for him to miss the cut at the Charles Schwab is pretty shocking. If you go to his past history, he's a past winner there. If you were going to do a one and done, he was probably the guy you were picking if you didn't spin him yet. And he missed the cut. Of course, Tony Finau, two of the guys that I identified from just a pure course history finishes, they were like the best two, and both missed the cut. It happens. But just side note, JT still struggling for me with the putter. And if he was over 30 to 1, I probably would have bet him. But, again, I don't know. We keep saying, when's JT going to, have that putting session? And when he does, he'll probably, have a good chance of winning. But it's been a while. And then occasionally, of course, our Byron Nelson buddy, pops up there fitting under that model. That was 24 rounds. Oh, and then I just did an even more recent form. So this is just looking at the past 3 tournaments. I always kind of do this. For me, recent form is 6 tournaments out, and then I want to look at 3 tournaments out. And it changes a little, but pretty similar. You got Scheffler, Schauffele, Hatton, Clark, Rahm, Griot, Hovland, Matsuyama, Cantlay, Gary Woodland, who's been just, again, ball striking. Ninja, not a bad bet. Actually, I really didn't put any money on him yet, but again, if he pops that putter, watch out. He's been ball striking that good. Austin Eckroat, who's been playing pretty solid. I will talk about him on the betting side. Corey Connors, Akshay Bhatia, been on the scene. Seabez, we're going to talk about him from a betting perspective, a couple of these guys. And then Russ Henley, of course, another guy that has kind of fallen under the Morikawa camp. I mean, again, Russ, one of the better iron players on tour, hits a ton of fairways. But the putter has been pretty suspicious for a while here. All right, now I always do, of course, we looked at recent form. Let's go take a look at the history. Who has done well at this track? Again, the old horses for courses. And a no shocker right off the bat, and this is pulling in 24 rounds of the golf, past 6 tournaments they played at Murfield, if they've played that many. And you've got Cantlay, you got Scotty Scheffler, of course, who I believe he actually maybe missed a cut. I think this is, at this time, would have played 3 times here, missed a cut once. You got Xander, Rahm, Morikawa. Again, you got to keep an eye on how many times they've actually played this event. And what that's showing is, of course, well, you're also missing all the data from the withdrawal that he had to have. So it would be a lot different from how he would be, either it'd be Cantlay 1 and Rahm 2 if you took in, of course, he should have had that win. Actually, if he would have had the win, it'd be Rahm number 1, Cantlay number 2. Just side note on that. Morikawa, Adam Scott, Duffner, of course, past winner here, as I mentioned. Kevin Streelman, Fowler, Matsuyama, Matty Wallace had a good showing here, but again, also missed a cut. You got Rory McIlroy, David Riley. Kuchar, over his career here, has had a pretty nice history, and it doesn't really think of the exact guy we think of, but hits a ton of fairways, great around the green, good putter. Also typically pretty decent at 200 out, but this year kind of been struggling a bit from that 200 plus mark. And then, of course, your past winner last year, Billy Horschel. And then, so what I did here is I want to look at just the last 2 years of data because, again, I mentioned that renovation in 2020. So that was taking in the renovation. Now, I'm not saying it was a total different golf course, but there were some, slight changes, some distance added. He changed some greens, where they were placed to bring in the water more. And there's a whole, I'm sure you'll get to watch quite a bit of that video coverage during the actual tournament. They will be showing that. But anyways, if you want to look at just the last 2 years after the reno, Rahm, Cantlay, which I believe that's honestly the way it should go from a historical perspective of this field of who's had the best showings here over and over. Scheffler comes up, Schauffele, Siwoo Kim, I think is pretty interesting here. Morikawa, that Matty Wallace, again, I mentioned had a nice showing once. Davis Riley just last year had a good showing here. Shane Lowry, Killer Keith, Sahith Theegala, who you saw on my cover screen, and also someone I'll talk from a betting side. Rory McIlroy, Seabez, Matthew Fitzpatrick, and Garrick Higo, who had a nice round here once, or a nice tournament once. And then if you want to look at it, I always call this kind of my one and done view. So if you're doing one and done still, or if again, some ideas that you could look at over the past 5 tournaments, who's had the best showings, again, with the mind that they did have the renovation in 2020. And of course, as I mentioned, Cantlay shows up number 1. Again, I think Rahm should be number 2, but you have this WD, which he did not withdraw. He got pulled out of the tournament, then had a T10 last year. But yeah, again, Kim, Schauffele, Rahm, Spieth, Rory, Billy Ho, Scott, Scheffler, Streelman, Fowler, Morikawa, Day, Theegala. Actually, he's played here twice with a T5 and a T32. And then Shane Lowry shows up with a pretty good historical form. But Shane, I think it's been in a bit of a rough year for him. All right, now let's go take a look at the Ironman. And again, what I've been doing a little bit different than what you guys used to see is pulling in, not only weighting the approach pretty heavily, but also heavily weighting those high percentages where they're coming in from a lot. And again, that was a 175 to 200, 150 to 175. And you could see the weightings. So 40% just on pure approach, and then 30-30 split between the two procs to the pins I mentioned. And no shocker number 1, again, and this is over the last 36 rounds of golf, 9 tournaments played. Victor Hovland comes in number 1. You got Scotty Scheffler, John Rahm, Gary Woodland, Matsuyama Morikawa, Shoffley, Griot, Fowler, Wyndham Clark, Cam Young, Seabez, JT, Straka, Glover, which also I'll talk to you about from a betting side, funny enough. But with all that said, yeah, that gives you a nice little view of who's been, what if you look at the number one thing that you need to do on this course, if you could only pick one stroking category, this would be it right here. So not a bad list of 15 golfers to pull from. And then what I want to do is just kind of now start to tighten this up and look at a little more recent form, because that was 9 tournaments. Now we're getting 6 tournaments view. And Victor Hovland shows up number 1, Seabez, Shoffley, Griot, Morikawa, Scheffler, Rahm, Ches Reavie, my buddy, 200 yards out. Matsuyama, Kim, Batia, Woodland, Cam Young, Ricky Fowler, and Wyndham Clark are your best iron guys with all that pulled in with the 2 procs to the pins. And it makes sense. And then let's look at just the last 3 tournaments these guys have played. It gives you a different picture. Of course, we got Griot, who just won the Schwab. Got Austin Eckroat, who's had good showings. I believe, what was it, the Byron Nelson he had a chance to win, was up there on Sunday. You got Hideki Matsuyama. You got Wyndham, Glover, Woodland, Hovland, Mark Hubbard, Scheffler, Batia, Morikawa, Seabez, Ricky, Xander, Shane Lowry has been showing up with the irons a little better. And again, so just a couple different ways to look at who's had the best irons over the last 3 tournaments, 6 tournaments, and 9 tournaments. So it's all up to you. Do you like more recent, or do you want to take a bigger snapshot of over and over routine? And then always, I don't think it's as crucial to be an amazing bent grass putter at this course. I think really where it stands out is guys that are very good on Bermuda because of the different grain changes, and guys that are good on POA because, again, they grew up on those surfaces and know that they're going to get some bad breaks as the afternoon goes on and that POA starts to grow and gets all, blotchy, if you want to say. But I still want to show this to you if you're curious, and we're going to look at one more little view here. Over the last 6 tournaments that they played on bent grass, remember, that would be like Oak Hill, the Masters. They don't play a ton of bent grass. Cantlay comes up number 1. Brendan Todd, just a good putter all over. I think Keegan Bradley is kind of interesting, especially because I think he fits the ball striking persona that we're looking at. So that he's been doing, pretty good with the putter. That's kind of an interesting thing, especially from a betting side. You got Seabez, Justin Lauer, Andrew Putnam. Adam Svensson has actually pulled out of this tournament too, so it is pretty well stated that he is hurt. He is injured. I have not done a bunch of research or tried to find out what's been going on with him, but I think he got hurt in the final round of the PGA Championship because he was playing really good golf and then had some struggles, and then he pulled out of the Charles Schwab, which I said, out of every course this guy plays, this is one of, out of 5 courses that he's probably got listed that he can go win or has an advantage. I think that would be the Charles Schwab at Colonial. I think it's a perfect fit for him. But he did pull out, so you have to keep an eye on Svensson and what's going on. Maybe it's a wrist, back, who knows. Sammy Burns, Victor Hovland, Danny McCarthy, John Rahm, Justin Suh. Been playing pretty good golf. He is a good putter. That's one thing I've come to learn about Justin Suh. Pretty good all-around game. Of course, he came out on the scene with, didn't get a lot of hype because you had Victor Hovland and Morikawa and Wolff, but he was also in that class, but he just did not come out and shine like those other guys. But he is now starting to show that he's, the guy's got game. Terrell Hatton, Adam Hadwin, and Dylan Fratelli, funny enough, pops up there. Our buddy who won the John Deere. Of course, that makes kind of sense on bent grass, but that was quite a long time ago. Okay, so then I wanted to take this view. Just was curious. So this is more, don't let the title fool you. I just kept it up there, but this is looking at the guys who've been the best around the green, putting, short game, and sand saves on bent grass. So this was something I was looking at because I do feel like that is a crucial, those elements right there, especially with how firm this course is probably going to play. And just was, like I said, anytime that I do some research for myself, I want to share it with you guys. And Terrell Hatton, funny enough, comes up number 1. JT Poston, who also won the John Deere. So funny enough, I'm not saying there's course correlation, but if you actually watch the John Deere, the TPC Deere Run, there is a bit of slope. It is bent greens. There is the trees. You do have to be accurate with the driver on that course. I mean, funny enough, like I said, there is some correlation there. I did not put that into comp courses and did not run that. But more and more as I'm kind of looking through this, it's kind of telling me that, funny enough, there might be some correlation there. Andrew Putnam, Brennan Todd, Taylor Montgomery, Alex Noren, Denny McCarthy, Lucas Hebert, Christian Bezadenhout, Rory McIlroy, Matty Wallace, Shane Lowry, Patrick Cantlay, Sungjae Im, and Eric Cole are over the last 6 tournaments or 24 rounds of golf on bent grass. And again, you'll see maybe some have a little less against that really kind of a short game model, if you want to look at it, who are the best. And why I'm putting these up there for you guys, again, is if you're like me, I do like to build lineups, like a ball striker lineup, the best irons lineup, the best bent putters. Like, I do like to do that because sometimes some things will come out that we didn't even see that was needed. Like if it's super windy, you're going to need that best ball strikers. If the course is super firm, maybe this is the guys that pop up, and show that they end up in the top 10 that we wouldn't be looking at. And on that note, here's your best ball strikers lineup. Again, against my model, but just looking at the ball strike line, the top 15 guys over the past 6 tournaments. Again, if you're new to that whole terminology, it is combining off the tee with approach. If you're curious, what does ball striking take into effect? Number 1, Scotty Scheffler, Cantlay, Hovland, Rahm, Rory McIlroy, Gary Woodland, Corey Connors, Morikawa, T-Hat, Siwoo Kim, Shane Lowry, Sam Stevens, Xander Schauffele, Hayden Buckley, and JT. And it's kind of funny with Sam Stevens. I don't know, it was just in his early days when I was watching him, I mean, he is a rookie. His putter was pretty hot. And now I've kind of come to learn as I've been watching him that the guy is a good ball striker, but the putting around the green is definitely an issue. And it seems like on these tougher courses, it's showing up more and more. All right. With the comp course selection, this is a tough one. I'll tell you, and I always tell you guys, I rank my comp course kind of overview, if you want to say. And I would not put a ton of weight into this because if we had stroking data for Augusta, I think Augusta and the Wells Fargo would be really the 2 best comp courses when you take field and bent greens and the scoring and how the courses play and all that. That would be the ones. But because we don't have Augusta, I can't put that in there. You could take stretches. You could, like I said, you could put the John Deere, the John Deere in. But again, the field is pretty weak typically for the John Deere, so it wouldn't do us a whole lot of good. Okay, so with all that said, the comp courses I did put in, of course, Wells Fargo, I think is a great one. You get the field, you get everything, the bent greens. I think, again, a mini major kind of tournament. Of course, I'm bringing in the Memorial. I did leave this in there. It's a little bit older. This was at Workday events. So it would have been the WGC Mexico that they replaced. And they played it at Jack's course, the concession. And there was a bit of crossover. Now, that is Bermuda greens. I will call that out. But if you remember if you know that venue, there were some similarities. And I kind of liked it was Jack design. I believe it was a par 72 around the same yardage. Like there was a lot of correlation that I put there, so I kept that in. And then this again is, I like the fields for the CJ Cup and for both of them at Shadow Creek. That was when Jason Kokrak won. Those are bent greens. Again, that course was pretty much designed after Augusta in Las Vegas. It was like, if you've ever seen, I've actually have some friends and family that have actually got to play that track. And you can play it if you go stay. Used to be very elite, right? It was the Wynn property designed, going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but just so you know, at one time, Wynn, created that course is purely just for him and some friends and whoever he invited. Then it was at the time, if you stayed at the Bellagio in a certain kind of room, you could get on there for, again, like $5 to $1,000. It's all depending. Like it was not cheap. Now, my understanding is if you stay at an MGM property, you can get on the course. There's like no tee times given. Like they just come pick you up, and it's an amazing place. I have not played it myself, but I've had friends and family who have, and they said, if you're in Vegas and you're wanting kind of an experience of a lifetime golf course kind of thing, go play Shadow Creek. And all you need to do is stay at an MGM property, talk to the concierge to kind of work out the details. Okay, and then of course the next year was the Summit CJ Cup. Again, you got like that 80-person, high-end player field. Again, that was bent greens and also some similarities. So that's the comp courses I'm pulling in, but the why I don't like it is not so much that the field and the course, it was just older data, right? I mean, we're going back 2-3 years here. So, okay, with all that said, if you are curious, this is what it kind of pumped out against my model. Xander, which I have no problem with that. Terrell Hatton, he came out and lit up the Shadow Creek. So I remember that well. Of course, Morikawa, I believe, won this workday event. Cantlay, Scheffler, Billy Ho, JT, Rory, Mats, Molinari. That's interesting. Russ Henley, Hovland, Rahm, Fitzy, and Griot. When I say it's interesting, again, he must have had some good showings again 2-3 years ago because Molinari has not been playing very good golf at all as of recent. But the rest of the list, I don't have a problem with. Again, I think it's a good list that you can play. Again, a little worried about Billy Horschel's game, but except for him and Molinari, I'd be pretty okay. Okay, so with all that said, here's my betting card, and it is quite a bit less than what you guys are probably typical of seeing because it is an elevated event. Also, a lot of these guys you're going to see here, I bet to win outright and also top 10. So I'll kind of walk you through that. But Corey Connors, I like a lot. Of course, got his second win at the Valero, so second time he won at the Valero. And again, kind of what I'm looking for, because as I mentioned, you don't have to be the best putter, especially within inside 10 feet. Again, that's what the stats have showed us at this course. And Corey Connors, but he's actually been putting pretty well. Not too far off from what Griot has been doing. I believe, of course, Corey's ball striking is typically exemplary. A lot, again, that fits into that kind of Griot, Hovland. You'll see I got Glover down there, and I do consider Lucas Glover one of the better ball strikers on tour. But man, is his short game just brutal at times. Seabez is purely on here for a couple of reasons. Because I always told you guys I'm typically a week early on guys, I should state. And so Christian Bezuidenhout, I think this course could fit him well. I mean, he's one of the best bent putters, at least over stroke gain data showing. He's got the short game. He doesn't have to hit it super far. He just has to hit the fairways. And the irons have actually, as you see, have been really hot. So everything's kind of calculating that. I'm like, you know what? If I don't bet it and he somehow does come through to get his first win at the Memorial. So that's why that happened. Actually, again, I bet him outright. I just like the talent. Again, the putter can be a big issue, but the ball striking's there. And I also bet him top 10. So he's one of those. Austin Eckroat, I did not bet him to win. I bet him top 10. And I think you're getting like 20 to 30 to 1. Like still pretty good odds to get these guys to finish top 10. Sahith Theegala, you saw he was on my cover screen. Kind of excited about this one for Sahith. I can't really verbally, not because he had a good showing here last year, but again, just his game overall. I think we've seen guys have a breakout at the Memorial as like their first win. Hideki Matsuyama was one of them. There's more like Lingermuth. I don't know about Duffner, but there is some guys, in the past that did get their first win at this tournament. And the guy's been playing, solid golf. And he kind of, for me, is like, he'll have like contention, like, have a chance to win. And then he kind of drops down and then he kind of comes back contention to win. So I feel like he's on that path again to contend. Harris English, again, been playing better golf. Did not pick him last week, but I did give him an honorable mention, and I had no issues with him. But now on a course that, for me, kind of fits everything that Harris English does, and also seeing what he's been doing. I mean, you can see the driver's been better. Good, kind of just solid, and he's kind of got all the facets of the game that we need. The driver is the big one, typically, where Harris has been kind of rough. And then Lucas Glover, I know this is kind of this will be my, I guess, super long shot. But again, I hit him at John Deere and been kind of watching him. And again, the ball striking's there. He's on bent greens where he has gained strokes, of course, to win the John Deere. And it just, again, kind of fits that mold. So I bet him top 10 and also outright, just as that crazy bet. And of course, not putting a ton of money on these, real long shots, but just enough to get me excited. So that's it. I'm probably going to bet. I mean, Cantlay came out at, 10 to 1, I believe. He's kind of like the guy that I guess if I was going to put, a chunk of money on, would probably be the guy that I would put that kind of money. I just haven't done it yet. And I know, as I mentioned, you guys know, I just really like the long shots. With all that said, that's the show. Thanks for spending some time with me. I'm going to now go through and get my analysis done for the picks. Hopefully, if possible, I will get that show out to you guys today, but it's probably likely going to be tomorrow, but early enough that you have time to look at it and, of course, use it for your picks. And as I mentioned, of course, don't forget, I do have the giveaway. So if you're not a subscriber and you're watching this, please hit that subscribe. I'm trying to get to 2,000 subscribers. Really no specific reason, but just as a goal, we hit 1,000. We're kind of building our way up. And, hey, this thing keeps going. Maybe I'll actually come on camera and we'll start having guests and maybe have you guys call in or be on a live stream. Like this thing, if it keeps kind of growing, it could keep evolving. It's you guys that are doing that. It is not me. As I keep seeing the positive comments and the actual subscribe base growing, I'm gonna keep doing this thing, and then maybe it just gets bigger and bigger. So thank you. It's all about you guys. And then of course, hey, follow me on Twitter. I always put out any information I see that is pertinent and also funny. So that's that. But yeah, don't forget the giveaway. Start telling me who you think is going to win the U.S. Open at the LA Country Club. And you all I need to hear from you once. So there's gonna be a few shows that I bring this up, but I wanted to start it right now and get your entries in. You only need to do it one time. You'll be in the drawing. All right, guys. Talk to you probably within either later tomorrow or worst case Wednesday.